the geopolitical environment confronting the United States today is far less auspicious than the geopolitical environment confronting that the United States confronted in 1991. And so I don't want to be overly sanguine. And again, China and Russia are certainly far more able, far more willing to contest U.S. influence today than they were 30 years ago. But I think, as you mentioned, so looking at just kind of the panoply of American competitive advantages, America's demographic outlook. I think if you speak with most demographers, they would say that of the major powers or of the great powers, the United States arguably has the most favorable demographic outlook. It's not a demographic outlook that's without its challenges. If you look at the rapid societal aging, other stresses on the American sort of body politic. Again, don't want to be overly sanguine, but again, among major powers, among great powers, I think most demographers would say that America probably has the most favorable demographic outlook, and certainly vis-a-vis China and Russia, its demographic outlook is vastly more favorable. Immigration. I'm a child of immigrants, and so for me, immigration is not just an abstract competitive advantage. It is very much an advantage that I've experienced, personally. My parents, they left Pakistan when they were very young, and there was a lot of uncertainty when you leave behind family, friends, all that and you come, you move thousands of miles, across oceans to settle in a new country. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of anxiety. But when they decided that they wanted to have children, they said, America is a place where whatever happens, we feel that, our children are going to have opportunities that we didn't have. And again, and you hear the story again and again, young immigrants from around the world taking that risk, leaving everything behind and settling here, and and having setting up businesses, their children have opportunities that their parents didn't have. So immigration is a tremendous advantage. So the late Lee Kuan Yew was a leader of Singapore. He was often asked, because he was someone who and he was one of the rare figures when he was alive who was, I think, equally trusted by American officials and Chinese officials, and kind of served as an interlocutor between them. And he was often asked, do you think that China will overtake the United States as the world's preeminent power? And he was often asked, kind of do this net assessment. What are America's principal competitive advantages? What are China's? And one of the advantages for the United States that he always cited was its ability to attract talent from around the world. And so he said China has an extraordinary talent base, roughly 1.3 at the time when he was speaking, 1.3 billion people, now about 1.4 billion people. So China has an extraordinarily large talent base, 1.4 billion people. But he said that the United States has a much larger talent base. It not only has sort of its domestic population, but it can draw on talent from around the world. And so you have immigrants from around the world who come to the United States, and they become part of the American story. They're setting up businesses. They're coming up with innovations. They are becoming public servants, and they really are contributing to the American story. And they contribute not only demographically, economically, technologically, but I think they contribute in a really powerful ideational way. And when you think about what makes the United States the world's preeminent power, it's not just its military prowess, its economic size, its technological advantage. I think thinking about America as an idea, the ability of the United States to attract individuals from around the world, and they come to the United States and make common cause, and they work alongside one another. The ability of the United States via immigration to refresh itself, to renew itself, to adapt itself to various societal challenges that present themselves to each generation, I think is a tremendous ideational advantage. Innovation we talked about, and of course its system of higher education, which remains unrivaled. Now again, none of those advantages are American birthrights. It takes hard work, and it will continue to take hard work to renew those advantages, but they are formidable. And then if you look at the external side of the ledger, again, very compelling advantages. Look at America's diplomatic network. Now, again, America's diplomatic network, it's under stress. It's under stress from within, it's under stress from without, but it remains a formidable advantage. And one of the observations, I don't know if I mentioned it in the book, I think I did, but if I didn't mention it in the book, I'll just mention it here. One of the op-eds I often sort of revisit when I think about this kind of competitive advantages and doing this comparative net assessment, Yan Shuitong. So Yan Shuitong, he's one of China's most distinguished scholars of international relations, and he wrote an op-ed in 2011 I think it was November 20th, 2011, if I'm not mistaken. And it was in the New York Times entitled How China Can Defeat America. And in this op-ed, he's enumerating what he believes are China's competitive advantages, and he's highlighting America's political polarization, its political dysfunction, and he's doing this net assessment. But he says, and I'm roughly paraphrasing him. He says the core of competition between the United States and China, at least externally, on the world stage, is going to come down to who has more what he calls high-quality friends, essentially allies and partners. And the United States, despite the reality that its diplomatic network is under strain, it still has a vast network of alliances and partnerships in Europe, in Asia, and we've seen in responding, just as an example, in responding to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we've seen America's ability to mobilize its allies and partners in Europe. In responding to an increasingly assertive China, we've seen the United States' ability to mobilize allies and partners in Asia. China doesn't have that. China doesn't have anything comparable to that sort of diplomatic network. Now, by virtue of just its sheer economic size, by virtue of its innovative capacity, and importantly, by virtue of the narrative momentum generated by that economic heft and technological capacity, China can make a lot of inroads, but on a largely transactional basis. China doesn't have a comparable diplomatic network, and scholars such as Professor Yan have argued that until and unless China is able to achieve a diplomatic network of comparable scale and of comparable depth to the one that the United States possesses, that it's going to be hamstrung in competitions.